Hi everyone, how you guys doing? So, I it's one of those rant moments, so bear with me. Our subject today is shock collars, and I have a reason why I'm talking about shock collars because I can talk about them, because I have used them and I have experience with them, and I decided not to use them anymore because I experienced that they are not working. You heard right. They do not work. They do work for people. Don't take me wrong. Everybody thinks they work for them best, so they use the shock collars, but they don't work ever for dogs. And I will explain to you in all the details why they don't. Not only that, I have also scientific evidence why they don't work, right? So, I have people who support the shock collars, famous trainers, very educated trainers, and I understand people who say, don't bash the tools. I get it. I don't bash the tools. I bash the abuse because there is no excuse for using them if you understand what they do. Okay. So I give you a little bit of an intro. Once upon a time, when I got into dog training and I was very successful on what I do, I used very, I was very supportive of the shock collars because I believe they work. And I had success with them, I thought. And the dogs were felt better, I thought. Later on, as I was so deep into it that I tried different versions, different systems, different timing, different power, different adjustments. I even called the research and development departments of different companies who sell those. Okay. Um, I have an engineering background, so my previous life, so called, I work in research and development producing machinery that you 100% have touched and worked on, from laminators to office machinery to heavy duty machinery, even machines that you sleep on produce mattresses. To give you just a heads up, my background. But at some point, I got overwhelmed. I kind of retired 25 years in the industry and I moved on. However, I took a lot of experience with me when I started working on dog training. So the systemic thinking, integrating systems, and understanding how complex system will work were very helpful for me to get into that idea. And of course, it was very handy since it was technology to reach out to that shock collar or electronic collar or stimulation collar. No matter how you use that, one thing is the fact: it uses batteries, it has an electric current, and they use a stimulation on the dog. What kind of stimulation depends on the settings and all these fans. That's not where we're going with this. Okay. Now, I had successful as working with aggressive dogs, and of course, back then I was very eager to work. My passion was to save more rescues and help more people. And of course, I was listening to the industry, and the industry says, well, if you work with aggressive dog, you need a shock collar, you need a prong collar because those bad behaviors need to be corrected. And I bought into that because I'm an engineer and things that are broken have to be fixed as quickly as possible, as efficient as possible, as less damage as possible. Good. But something didn't sit well with me. A, because I'm kind of a philosophical person, I want to understand concepts. And on the other side, I was very interested to see how those systems really work. Okay? I need to measure them, I need to understand what the situation is. And so I started doing deeper research. Um, give you a heads up, I was working with dogs over 100 pounds. And I was working with New York shelters. And I was working with New Jersey shelters, and I was working with Long Island shelters and Connecticut shelters, and basically the whole East Coast. I was working with several national rescues, including Mastiff breeds rescues, and Cane Corso rescues, and Bull Mastiff rescues, and Pit Bull rescues. All those rescues that you says, holy bark, these guys are. I work also with Pyrenees rescues and Guardian breeds, and you name it, I work with it. And I was very into, again, I'm telling you, I was very into that these things work because I was putting the technical aspect of it. Push the button, dog reacts, problem solved, right? As I look deeper into that, I was working at the same time with some trauma that I have in person. So I realized that I had trauma. I had complex trauma. I'm a complex trauma survivor. I've several years in therapy here and there and everywhere, right? In different countries, in different continents. For the point that I'm here right now talking to you, I've been through a big process, including accepting that I had made a mistake and I had to change the way I thought I was doing right into a new thought of doing right, putting morals and ethics into place, not just quality and quantity. So the day comes, give you a story short, I got a dog who's highly aggressive, and his goal was to bite me. And I knew it, and I even have a bite suit, but it was a dog that I had committed to, and I needed to get him out. I have a huge community looking at me, and I recognized that I can't even put a shock collar on that dog. How will I use a shock collar if I cannot even approach the dog? There was nobody there who could put it for me. So it just is me and the dog, And I had to come up with a plan. The plan was understanding why the dog was attacking me so I can reverse that. I recognize if I used any punishment methods on that dog even would lash even further out because that dog had so much stress going on. He had only 3 legs and his goal was to take me down. That was it. Needless to say, I have about $26,000 of bite injuries here and there because I thought I was doing a great job and I was really working with aggressive dogs. So I decided to do something different. Understanding that shock collars don't work was my first aha experience. And I'm going to list for you why I fall for these myths. Because they are very convincing. Those people who support those myths have an attitude. They are right. And if you don't believe it, then you're wrong. So there is right and wrong. So it's either their way or no way. Let me give you an example. The first myth that most people say is the dog, the reason why people use the shock collar is to communicate with the dog. So you use the shock collar to send a message to the dog, right? Now, my first question is, what kind of message am I sending to the dog, right? So my question was, what exactly am I sending and what exactly is my dog receiving? So let me show you what's going on here. Of course, I have to find that particular picture that I want to show you. Good. So I'm communicating with the dog's skin. And what exactly I do, I send an information onto the skin with 2 metal pieces that create a current, high current, about 4,000 volts and up. And that current triggers those nerves under the dog's skin. Pressure, vibration, light touch, and skin stretch. And you will tell me, well, you're not using any pressure on the shock collar because the shock collar is just touching the skin. Okay, so we have light touch, right? And then what we do is we send the current through the dog's skin into the epidermis and the dermis and those 4 sensory systems that are under the dog's skin. The Messinger corpuscle, Pacinian corpuscle, Merkel discs, and Ruffini endings. So these are the types of nerves we're looking at that we communicate with. And those dogs take those information, and the first things they do, right? Anybody has an answer what the first thing they do? They trigger the sympathetic nervous system. So, the brain has its own system that gathers information from the entire body and the environment and processes it, makes a quick decision, life or death. And those, through the shock collar activated surface and the nerves underneath, are immediately triggered all at the same time because they're being shortcut, electrocuted, even in the very that kind of amperage but high voltage, and that triggers the sympathetic nervous system. What it does, puts the dog into a fight or flight, either or, right? So if I communicate with my dog and I want to correct him for something that he does, I send him a shock message, fight or flight. So the dog is just minding his business, doing things that I don't want him to do, and out of nowhere, out of the blue, kaboom, it hits him. And the first thing the dog will do is get surprised to death. Put shock in there because the body gets shocked. Out of nowhere, a high and intense alert, fight or flight for your life, is triggered. In other words, a booby trap goes on if you're in your office while you're doing your work. What will you first do? Holy bark, what was that? Will be your reaction. Great communication skills you just used to send the dog the message. All you did just push the button, right? Like you put a remote control. And the dog has no clue what just happened because he thought it was totally safe to do what he does. He thought his behavior is appropriate to the situations, and all of a sudden, something attacks him that he has no clue of. It comes from underneath what he considered to be safe. So now the dog is preoccupied of that sensation that just hit him. Now, I would like you to do me a favor as we talk. First of all, for you who don't know me, I'm Roman with Holistic Dog Training, and I'm an ex-shock collar user. I admit it, I'm not proud of it, but it was piece of my journey to learn about those things. And now, understanding how those work, I changed my concept, and I'm an anti-shock collar user because I found a way out of it. And there is a way out of it. And every behavior that you think you may use a shock collar, you don't need to because there are alternative, multiple options to not use them. Okay? Now, I would like you to share that video. I would like you to add a few comments on that video. And I know I will get the backlash. Really? You're going to hurt me? You're going to use shock collars on me? You're going to use prong collars or intimidating methods? Many people have tried to kill me. Doesn't work. So you have to do better than that. So I'm not buying the problems. So if you think you're going to bully me, no problem. So going down the road, let me continue and share for you a couple of details. So now we learned what exactly are we communicating the dog and how the dog communicates and get that information towards him. So our communication skills by using that button is pushing the dog into fight or flight response. Now that the dog had the first experience, the next thing is going to happen is he's being alert. He's waiting for it to happen again. Now, remember that dial that's on the shock collar? It gives you a range from 0 to 120, for example, or percentage, or no matter what numbers those have. What exactly do they say? They've changed the voltage from 2. And that is how much intensity goes into the dog, into that message. So you can have a little ding, or you have a doorbell, or you have a church bell hitting your head. Now, since the dog has already the first impulse experience, he's hypersensitive, so he doesn't get it again. So he's alert, his body's alert, he's on alert mode. And your setting that was on 5 because you were smart enough to test it, all of a sudden, it's double as it was before. So while you're thinking you did a great job and adjusted it correctly, The dog is more sensitive than that. So instead of being sensitive on 5, now he's sensitive on 2 and even 1. You know what that means? That the next hit will be double or triple as much intense as the previous one, even if your intention is to be less. Why? Because the dog's skin is now alert and expected to happen. Have you waited ever for your phone to ring and hear every beeps and every buzzer that happens to your phone? Before you wouldn't care, but all of a sudden you do, and now you're waiting for that sound to happen. And that's what happens with the dogs too. So the next thing we're going to happen here is, since we clear the communication skills, then we're going to look for what exactly are we trying to fix. So let's look at the behavior. Bugs, are you done there? Thank you. Dogs. The next thing we're going to look for is, why did we push the button? We pushed the button because we didn't like what the dog did. Now my question is, what exactly didn't you like on the dog's behavior? You didn't like the way he reacted. You didn't like the way he thought. You didn't like the way he felt about it, right? So we want to make very clear that dogs are very sensitive, sentient beings. They have emotions. They have feelings. And if we combine all those things together, we recognize that the dog, just like a 5-year-old, has all the set of emotions a 5-year-old can have. Science proved already, guaranteed dogs have at least emotions like a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, varies a little bit. Dogs can even sense grief and feel sorry for things. Now, the reason why the dog does things, because he believes that is the best way to go. And guess what? They do it for at least 100,000 years being with us. Science can only prove it technically 50,000 years, but I know from ancient scripts, that we're talking about 100 years dogs being with people. So for all this time, people and dogs live together in harmony, figuring things out, communicating with each other without any technical tools. And all of a sudden, somebody tells you that you cannot communicate with your dog without the shock collar. It's kind of telling you, hey, you cannot have friends without a phone. Yes, you can. You don't need a phone to have friends. No, 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 no. You cannot live without that. You will not have friendship without your phone. And you know how that goes. You know that's a lie. So people lie to you, telling you you cannot train your dog without shock collar. Everything that your dog does can be corrected with a shock collar. And I'm telling you, this is a wrong attitude, because the dog has done nothing wrong. And here's why. The dog has a thought, and a thought will be triggered by a situation. And that situation triggers the dog to go into an emotional state, right? And that emotion will come to surface, and that forces the dog to respond with a behavior. So if I show the dog something he never saw before, he will worried about things. He's like, what was that? If I don't like that, do you think it's the right thing to do to shock the dog for showing that emotion of curiosity and stress? What exactly am I sending here? I'm sending the message that you worried about is more dangerous than you thought. Great. So you try to correct the dog for a behavior that is fear-based by making it more fearful as it already is. Right? Now, let's put that aside. Let's go to the other side. Let's say the dog is very confident and he knows exactly what to do. He wants to protect his territory. So he's going to the fence and barks his head off because somebody passes by that he doesn't like. Why do you think he's doing that? Because he thinks and he's proud of offering his service to protect his property against intruders. So when is an intruder actually an intruder? When he intrudes your house, or when he intends to intrude your house? And when does this intention start? When do you feel that a person is about to steal your car? When he's walking away from your car, or if he's approaching the car? What if he's looking at your car? What if he's looking longer at your car? When does this kick in of emotion? Oh, what are you doing with my car? Right? So in that moment that you are triggered to worried about this situation, Somebody comes and shocks you for that because he thinks that's inappropriate to do, even though that's your breed trait. You were born and raised for the last 300 years, 200 years to do exactly that, to alarm if something doesn't look good, something that looks fishy, suspicious. Your guardian breed, herding dog, hunting dog, all these things that triggers your excitement because that's what you were bred for to do. And all of a sudden, you're being punished to feel that way. Now, do you think that's the right thing to do? Now, you don't like it. I'm totally with you. And you rather want that to stop because animal control already called you and told you the next time you're going to get a fine, and then your dog is being social disturbance, whatever, public disturbance, and then you put it on notice. And then you says, well, I don't have time. I need him to stop barking, right? And then you're going to grab the collar and you're going to feel better because suddenly your dog stopped. I agree with you. That will definitely stop your dog from barking, likely, or it can make it worse. Ever thought of that? You're taking a risk for that dog to be so surprised of the situation that now he can associate the sensation that his sympathetic system triggered, fight or flight, is the reason of because of that person, because of that dog, because of that car. So the dog literally makes the connection. The reason why I feel miserable right now is because of that showing up. Well, you wanted the dog to stop barking, really. You wanted to feel good about it by making your dog feel miserable. Is that the concept that you will address your child playing loud music in his office? Putting a shock collar on and push the button every time it turns in a bit louder? Or you come in with morals and ethics? Tell him, hey, sweetie, let it down a little bit. What makes your child listening to you? Because you're the parent. And you have proven yourself of being the parent, trustworthy, consistent, supportive. And your child says he doesn't want to screw up that relationship. He's going to be quiet. It worked, right? Without using any punishing tools. Just a talk. Father to son, mother to daughter, father to daughter, mother to son. What did you apply here? You applied your authority. You applied the service that you offer your child, so your child feels the service to you. So there is a relationship going on. So what if you come with the same perspective? What if your dog wants to be in a good relationship, and the reason why he does what he does is because he believes that is the relationship you want? Him protecting you from anything that out there could be of harm of you. So the more you yell and scream about it, the more you're supporting his situation. But what if you will be able to change the dog's thoughts to associate that's happening in front of him with something very pleasant? The reason why you get a reward is because you didn't bark and you didn't attack. And your dog will be like, oh, well, that was easy. So I don't need to suffer and struggling with it because that's obviously it's not a problem. What the dog believed it is, it's not. So the way out of there is cognitive therapy, helping understand to change the thoughts of what is happening in front of him and change alternatively the behavior that happens towards that. And you don't need the shock collar. Ever. You never need to charge the battery. Right? You never need to be there and do it. It happens on its own. The dog knows that that is not a problem. A doorbell? Who gives a bark? It's just a doorbell. It's not the end of the world because that's what the dog thinks. If something happens outside, it doesn't make any sense to him. It's the end of the world and everybody's going to die and he's there to protect you. He's on the front line. He's not a suicide commando. He's there to help your family. So you don't need the shock collar for that. And whoever tells you that's the only way to do that because it's a remote message, he's lying to you. because it's not a message. It's a punishment. No matter how you schmuck it, no matter how golden dust you put on it, it is one thing. Is it positive punishment on top of his existing situation? So there is something coming on top of what he already struggles with. Another information that he cannot handle. Great. Now, I know some of you will say, "Oh, my friend, are you driving a Prius? Are you one of those people who eat green and are vegetarian?" No, I'm not. I'm driving a truck, and I'm not a vegetarian. And I'm not driving a Prius. I drove one, by the way, just because I didn't have money to pay for gas back then. So, what I'm telling you here is actually a scientific proven fact. It's not out of the blue. I'm not coming up with the plans, stories, blah, 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 that I cannot prove. I have proof of it. Let me show you my proof. I'm going to share the screen with you with one of my documents that actually I put together, and you can check it out. Okay, now let's scroll here a little bit. 26 reasons why the dogs, why to never use a shock collar. On those 26 reasons are basically scientific papers. Now let me get very quickly to that point so you're not suffering with it. So I put already other scientific papers in here, so I'm going to go down here and talk about the rest. Here are 33 more scientific reasons why not. And I'm scrolling, and there are links on that, and I'm scrolling, and there are references on that, and I'm scrolling, right? holisticdogtraining.org, go to my blog, click on why not using a shock. Okay? And I will have some links there for you to check. Plus, I will explain to you all these myth bustings. Now, the other thing that I see very often is that people use the shock collar to protect the dog of being killed on the streets and from the neighbors. So it says that electric fences wear shock collars, no matter how they call it, okay, invisible fence, whatever they should make it with, keep your dog safe from escaping. This is false. On one study showed actually higher risk of escaping associated with electric fences compared to physical fences. So a physical fence is what keeps your dog safe, not an electronic fence. And if you do me a favor and go very closely and read the instructions in the notes, in the description, you will see a very big little letters, bold, with a attention sign. Electronic fences are not safe containment device. Thank you. Cheers on that. So the manufacturer who tells you that this is a safe device, he puts in a clause, it's not a safe device. And you can only use it in supervision, you being there watching it, watching your dog. If I have to be there watching my dog, he doesn't need a fence because I can call him. Oh, I forgot about that. Your dog doesn't have a good recall. Great, you're going to use a shock collar for that because that brings your dog back. Why exactly is he coming back to you? Because he unconditionally loves you? Or he's scared of getting punished? Is that the relationship you want? Honey, don't leave me because I'm going to punish you if you do. Now you love me even more. No, it's not. The reason why your dog works is because he's afraid that he's going to get shocked if he doesn't do return to you when you call to come. So he's not coming because you called him. He's coming because he's afraid to stay. Wow. I think that's a cool idea. It works great. For whom exactly? Now, if you want your dog to return, you can have your dog returned 25% more likely using a method that what the dog will win, where 100% your dog will win following your instructions. Yes, because your dog wants to return because he believes there is something in for him. something that he wants that you have when you call him that is more important of that is dealing with over there. Yes, of course you have to work for that. It doesn't come for free. You need to establish secure attachment relationships so the dog can trust you. You have to be consistent. You have to work with it. But the same thing you have to do with the shock collar. You think the shock collar doesn't need work, right? You need to recharge the batteries once in a while. You need to check the fence, making sure it's not broken or cut. You want to make sure that the dog's shock collar is charged. You have to put the shock collar on and off every day because you cannot leave him on all the time because you're going to have skin burns. Oh, forgot about it. They told you that don't do anything to the dog. Yes, they do. Having the quarant collar too long on will cause skin irritation, okay, and eczema, and actually will create holes in your dog's neck. I forgot about it. You use it appropriately. What exactly means appropriately? Like appropriately using a gun to make a taxi driver drive you from point A to point B. Where exactly do you point the gun to be more appropriate? Over here, a little bit here, or a little down, maybe here back on the, what exactly? So that's kind of like false statements. Because the reason why the dog comes back to you is because he wants to. That's what you want to rely for. That your dog that you care for, that's obviously your best friend, part of your family, comes to you because there's something in for him that you have, that you guarantee will give him, because you always do. Sometimes immediately, sometimes later. And if you want to contain your dog in your fence without having a fence, because you're not allowed to have a fence because of the town regulations and community standards, then you have to work with your dog on boundary training, which means you have to do the same work you do with a shock collar. Instead of punishing the dog for leaving, you're rewarding him for staying, which is 25% more effective, scientifically proven, using specialists of each branch, specialists with shock collars and specialists with force fit training, compared with each other. Each one was chosen by organizations that support the each standard. And yet, the force fit trainers were more successful, and the dogs were scientifically proven happier than the other ones. The other ones were just stressed. So that doesn't stand either. So that's busted too. Let's look further down the road because I want you to be more educated. My dog loves his e-collar. Shock dogs exhibit more stress than dogs trained with other methods, even outside of training sessions. Huh. And the first question that people usually say is, well, those scientific papers, how do we know that they use properly the shock collar? Trust me, those scientists went to companies and asked for the best of their best to do those tests. Not you and me, the best of the best that the company recommended, who sells those stuff, right? So you don't trust the company you bought the shock collar for them choosing the best of their best to prove the scientific that's better using a shock collar. But they couldn't prove it because it wasn't. So, going down the next level, teaching the dog obedience. Now, even the term obedience is kind of coming with weird situations. We want the dog to do something, or what is going to happen. So people confuse obedience. We want the dog to do something for themselves. He wants to sit, he wants to do that, he wants to do this. And then we use a method, it's called pressure on, pressure off. What exactly does it do? It puts the dog into a stress, on or off, pressure or not pressure. In other words, you're putting a finger in an outlet. I know. Who would be stupid comparing an outlet? A 12-volt battery. You like a 12-volt battery? Have you tested a 12-volt battery? Yeah, you put it on your tongue, see if it works. Right? What's the problem with that? Put it on your tongue, and what's going to happen? Your hand will automatically pull it away. So you have to force your hand and yourself to keep it that way because you don't like the sensation on your tongue. Of course, shock collars are not being used on tongues, but I give you kind of an example how it feels like. Pressure on, pressure off. So you have a fresh 9-volt battery, you will not be able to hold it on your tongue. Why? Because your tongue doesn't feel well and you don't like it. And somebody tells you you're going to keep that on and count to 10. And if you don't count to 10, I will not let it out. And how quickly would you count to 10 to get rid of it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Thank you. So you would be obedient following counting to 10 or you're going to get punished. But what exactly is what we want the dog to do? We want the dog to sit. What is sitting? Sitting is an expression of emotions. I feel safe where I am enough to feel seated. So, sitting is an emotional state of patience and feeling safe. Standing means I don't feel really safe. I have an option to stay or leave, to fight or flight. So, if a dog is alert, he wants to stand, he doesn't want to sit. And what does actually laying down mean? Laying down means I feel so comfortable or I want to stay under the radar, depending on the situation. So if you ask your dog to do something and you force him to do it, whether he likes it or not, you force your dog's behavior onto an emotion that is not there. You force your dog to feel safe, but he doesn't. But he's afraid to do it, otherwise, he gets punished. Do you see what kind of situation you're creating there? Technically speaking, you're causing your dog stuck trauma. Why is that? Let me explain to you. You have a trigger, you have a response, you have a reason to believe that that response will help, and it did help. So you got out of the problem by doing a specific behavior. Your sympathetic nervous system calmed down because you were successful solving the problem. You don't have a trauma of that, you have an experience. Now, the other side is the shock collar side is I ask my dog to sit and I shock him for that. So the dog forced me to be seated while he wants to leave and he can't because you forced him to. That experience is stuck. He's stuck in a fight flight response and he cannot fight and he cannot flight. He's stuck in it. So his sympathetic nervous system is charged, but it cannot discharge because he cannot make a behavior. That is a trauma. It's not my invention. If you look into trauma healing and dealing with PTSD, that's exactly what they do. They want you to release your trauma. So, in other words, while you're trying to get your way, all what we create here is trauma by using those shock collars. Instead of helping your dog solve the problem, we create another one, even worse, the one he has. And how exactly did the shock collar end up on your dog? Oh, you had to put it on because the trainer told you to do it. Or you wrote an article or you watched a video or something and everybody was laughing about it because that's a kind of cool thing to do. Your dog don't think he knows who put it on it? Oh, you thought you were going to let it on the collar like for 3-4 days. Your dog will forget who did it. Right? That's what I thought too, but he doesn't. I worked with a dog who was going through training with a trainer using a shock collar. And because the trainer didn't want the dog to see that he had a shock collar, he had his hands in his pockets so the dog wouldn't see the remote control. Well, the dog went home and the grandfather came home and, it was cold. He put his hand gloves in his pockets and the dog attacked him and he bit him really bad. And nobody knew what happened. And the first thing I did, ask the person who had that dog, was the dog in training? They said, yes. Were you present? He said, no. How long was he in training? Oh, he was on training boarding for 3 weeks. Okay, so do you know what tools they use? He said, yeah, they use kind of like an electronic stimulation collar. It's not a shock collar, he told me. It's a stimulation collar. I was like, sure. Now call your dear friend and tell him what happened to your grandfather, and he's going to blame the dog for it. But here's what happened. the dog got triggered by the hand being in the pockets because the trainer likely did. And I was right. It's exactly what happened. And now how I know that? Because I watched videos of this trainer actually doing exactly that on his video channel. You think I'm smart? No, I just know how to look for it. And then we had to help the dog understand that in the pockets are also treats, not just punishment. And from the pockets, treats will come. And the dog changed his idea. He changed the way he feels about those hands in your pocket. But also, he changed his idea what people actually have to offer when they come up, because the dog was just scared of people approaching. And he knew people who are approaching hands in the pocket will hurt even more. So he wanted to kill them. That was fucked up. But this is only one story. I have about 2,500 stories to tell you. We're going to sit here for the next couple of months just telling stories. Or you can trust me on that. A, because I have proof of it. I just showed you 26 scientific papers, and there are more to add it. And the other part that it is, I have done it before. I have done it. And I thought it worked. And I researched it and I figured out it doesn't. Because I didn't only look for directions that fit my purpose, I looked to disprove myself. I wanted to make sure I'm being on the right path. So I didn't look like how successful shock collars are. I read upon how problematic shock collars are, and I found more evidence than proof. Because I was trying to prove that shock collars work, and I couldn't find any. There's only one scientific paper that actually proves that the shock collar is better than choking the dog. Yeah, that's exactly what it says. So we have one scientific paper that says for type of killings, killing with a gun is faster than killing with a knife, and we take that as a standard. No, it's not. It proves exactly the opposite. That aversive training, no matter how you put it, is wrong for dogs. Now, let's go in the other direction. Let's go into fixing the mess that we created because we become aware that that thing actually doesn't work because you get stuck with it. Your dog will never get off that collar because you will not ever go for it because you haven't worked on another level. You only use that method. In other words, you cannot drive a car without a steering wheel. How can you? How can you? Well, a couple of years passed, you couldn't. Now you can. Well, because we have remote-driven cars, you don't need to do anything. They just get you from point A to point B. Well, I'm not comparing dogs with cars, but I'm just saying that absolute thoughts are not absolute, especially in technology, because we prove new things every day. But a couple of years ago, when we started using shock collars, we didn't have imaging of MRIs on dogs because we couldn't make an MRI on dog because we couldn't use the shock collar to use the dog because you cannot allow metals to be in an MRI area. So we used positive reinforcement, and the dog is just laying there, passive, not moving, going through an MRI. Have you been in an MRI room? I hope not. You know how much noise that makes? It's a huge dynamic machine running with multiple RPMs per minute, making a huge noise. And that dog is still calm, waiting to be rewarded until the MRI is done and he doesn't move. Lions are giving their paws to get injected and get medical treatment. Well, you cannot put a shock collar on that animal. How would you train the animal to give you his paw? Using positive reinforcement training, making something the lion wants, and he would do everything for it. Right? How do we train gun dogs to accept the gun? Punishing them for hearing the noise or making them love hearing the noise? What do? Far away a gunshot, and we start dinner, and we start breakfast. And the gunshot comes no closer and closer. So we desensitize the dog with a gunshot because that gunshot means food. I hate cars. I hate driving a car. But I love cars. I love cars because I can get from point A to point B. You know how much? I have to get a credit. I had to pay money to the bank to get my car. I hate it, but I like it. Does it mean I love my car? No. Does it mean car makes me happy? No, I'm in debt. So if somebody tells you dogs are happy about the shock collars, I'm going to prove you exactly the opposite. Primary reinforcer and secondary reinforcer. In other words, I love making money. I hate going to work. But with money, I can be successful. I can buy things that I love. And I love having things. I love to go on vacation. But I hate my car. But the car gets me to work. So I love my car because it gets me to work. I get paid for it. And then with that money, I can. But you see what I'm talking about? In order to have something that I like, I have to go with something I don't like. So the dog wants to go out for a walk. He needs that. It is in his needs. So in those needs, he will do everything possible to satisfy his biological needs. So he sees the shock collar. That's the way to get out. He loves his shock collar because it gets him outside to pee and he gets time with you. But he doesn't love your shock collar. He has to love it. He doesn't have a way around it. He has to accept it. You see what I mean? You want that walk with you to be a way of being in harmony with your dog going outside like a free animal, like a free dog in nature, exploring, smelling. Who told you the dog has to be next to you? It's like I'm giving you a newspaper and only let you read the page 3, but you want to go page 1 and page 4. No, 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 no. You paid the newspaper, you only read the page 3 because I told you so. Because I want you to have fun reading. And you're like, I hate page 3. You love page 3. That's the only newspaper you have ever in your life. And then slowly, slowly, you love page 3 because the only thing you can read is page 3. So you appreciate page 3. You appreciate the one who gives you page 3. Is that the relationship you want with your dog? Or you want to go to the next level? Hey, buddy, let's go for a walk. And your dog is happy to go for a walk without feeling the need to get punished for doing something wrong and walking on eggshells. That is a secure attachment relationship. Hey, honey, you want to go with me to the movies? I love you too. Kind of situation, right? That's what you want to do. But I understand that your dog is pulling you down the street, and your dog is a jerk, and he does all these miserable things. You're an embarrassment in your neighborhood. You walk outside, and windows are kind of like, he's taking his dog out for a walk again. Who's walking his dog? His dog is walking him, right? Well, it's easily to be addressed because all the dog wants to do is to have fun on the walk. And all you have to prove your dog is with you on the loose leash is more fun than pulling on the leash that gets you nowhere. You don't need to use punishment or fear or trauma in your dog to make that fun. All you have to do is teaching a dog that loose leash gets you more, gets you places you have fun. And you can start with things that your dog like. For example, you can show him that you have some treats in your hands before you even put the leash on, and he says, "Hey, honey, we're gonna work with something today. Here are the treats that you like." And your dog is like, "Oh, I want more of those." Me too. Okay, so let's do this. You sit calmly, get the leash on, I'll give you a treat. Okay, you wait for further instructions, I'll give you another treat. And your dog is like, "Oh my God, life is so good." And you're like, "Yeah, I know, right? We're going to go for a walk." And you go, "What to do? We're going to go from one place to another. I'll help you find the best smelling spots so you can read your newspaper from page 1 to page 20 and gather your enrichment. That's where you live. Your environment is full of sand or side, depending on what breed you are, and not so restricted and fear of getting punished for making a mistake because daddy wants to you be a perfect shoulder looking up to you. Dude, what exactly is your dog's life? A bent neck looking at you while walking? You are not the world, man. You're not the world. You are a conveyor of your dog's success. and the way he grows up in his environment and the way he perceives his environment. It's not the shock collar giving him messages, it's your relationship that gives that opportunity. You don't need the punishing tool to get that. All you need is teaching your dog what's the best way to get there, not how is the best way to avoid punishment. For your dog, that punishment comes with no excuse because your dog believes what he does is because the way he thinks is the only way to work. And you just punish it instead of giving another option. Let me give you an example. Let's play a mind game. Okay? And I know some of you will say, oh, yeah, that, you're sure. I'll give you a word, and I would like you to tell me how you feel in the comments. I say the word shark. What emotion comes up? What is your first thought? What is your first thought? What is the next following emotion that comes with it? I give you a couple of seconds to type it in. Shark. What are your thoughts? What comes to your mind? What emotion will follow? And then I'm going to give you a second word. Shark vacuum cleaner. 90% of people I tell exactly that example, most of them laugh. And I ask them, why are you laughing? And the first thought is, well, shark vacuum cleaner keeps the house clean, right? Some people says, I hate vacuuming. I get it, me too. I have a Dyson, by the way. I don't have a shark vacuum cleaner. And then I said, hold on. What emotion will come up? So fun and laughing and happiness because the house is clean. All this emotion comes up because I triggered them. I say the word and you got triggered. And then I said another word and another word, and suddenly the emotion changed. So I can change your emotion over distance? Wait, what? How is it possible? How can I affect you over distance? Just using words. And I'll give you a third question. How do you feel now about shark? And usually people have a pause. They're thinking. Good. That's a great choice. You know why? Because your thoughts did not go straight to the shark. They went in between. Your mind tried to find out, is it a shark or a shark vacuum cleaner? So there was an in-between state. And I would use that state to reward you with $100,000 for not thinking the wrong direction, for thinking in the right direction. All of a sudden, I was able to put your brain in neutral, not being afraid and not being confident. Because I gave your brain an option. Option A, option B. A forced situation, a relief situation. And the body doesn't want to be stressed. It doesn't want to think negative. It wants to think happy and survive, not pain and fear and dying. But you are the one who can convey that message. So make what the dog thinks be in the right direction, in a positive direction, in a positive, rewarding direction, in a direction where your dog feels confident that he can go that route and he can survive, even thrive, following your directions. And of course, you can go in the other route, causing more stress and more displease. So the dog is scared of making a decision, and you put your dog into a survival mode or into helplessness. Helplessness. Let the s come out quickly and sharp. Helplessness. Like a snake. You're trapped. You know, and every time you move, you're going to get the bite. The body is in a situation, it cannot go either way. It gets stuck. Any move can kill him. Speaking of snakes, did you know that doing snake training with dogs using a shock collar, there's a 50% chance it goes wrong? 50%. Either the dog will avoid the snake or he will attack the snake because of that experience with the shock collar. Ask my Texas colleagues. They tell you, well, it usually works. What I want of the dog is not to afraid the snake, is to avoid the snake. Because some dogs who are afraid of things, they want to kill it. Remember a guardian dog? So if a snake would do something to him, he's gonna go after the snake and kill it dead. Why? Because he can. Now, if the shock collar uses a factor of fear on the other dog because of that dog will attack the snake, which we don't want. But what if I teach my dog to let me know when he sees a snake and come for some treats instead? Thank you for returning. And what if I make my dog bark? Give my dog a bark for finding a snake and come back to me telling me that he just saw a snake, and I appreciate him for doing that, and we walk away from it. Who's gonna be more happy? The snake not getting killed? The dog surviving the snake? And me walking confident without having my shock collar all the time on my hands and paying attention what the snake is. Right? As easy as that. Is it scientifically proven that dogs, actually, I don't know, I haven't looked it up, but it's make a consequence, a logical sequence of if you can train your dog to stay out of a zone, you can teach your dog to stay out of a snake zone. Dogs can smell a snake. They can find snake because they're paying attention to things more than we do. So we teach the dog to, every time he sees something that's weird, bark and come back to me, and things are good. I know not to go in there. How do we have dogs finding cadaver? How do we have dogs finding drugs? Look closely. Do you see any dog with a shock collar on it? Why? I thought it works. No, it doesn't. You're going to shock the dog for finding something? He gets rewarded for pointing it out. Speaking of pointing, pointers, what do pointers do? They're pointing in a direction where the trigger is so you know where to shoot. What do people use a shock collar? To help the dog return. He would return anyway if he knows that returning is a good choice. If I call you. If I don't call you, don't return, you're not getting paid. So no matter what the problem is, okay, you got me there. I know that your dog is attacking bicycles, and he's attacking the UPS guys, and he's attacking every car that comes in your house. Why? Because he had a bad experience. He got hit already three times by a truck. Okay. You remember that episode of the famous dog trainer who said, I have no way out. I need to use a shock collar because that dog, his life is at risk. I agree with him. The dog's life is at risk and he had to do something. But there are so many things he can do, right? To help the dog change his mind about what the truck is. Because here's the problem. If you use a shock collar towards the truck that hit the dog, all you do is reinforce his suspicions that that truck is bad to the bone. And next opportunity is going to go it again. And I know many people who tried that. And it worked for a couple of days and maybe a couple of weeks. And then the dog went back to chasing cars because he didn't care being shocked. His priority to kill the truck is higher than his pain level. What? Dogs do that? Yes, they can ignore pain. And I had that experience. I had that dog who didn't care about pain to a certain level of arousal, of excitement, of aggression level. And at that point that he said, me or that, he would kill it. And he didn't care about his pain because he cared about him surviving. And so I had turned that shock collar on 120 and that dog didn't even flinch. He didn't sense the collar anymore because his nervous system shut everything down because all he had in his mind is rage. Great. Now you have a shock collar, you hand her 120, and that dog doesn't even react. I know you use an extra strong collar because you had a Mastiff breed, so that 120 is basically 240, kind of, sort of, and that doesn't work. What would you do next? Shoot the dog? You have to come up with some work, man. You have to come up with the idea that you have to change the dog mind, what he sees in the problem. Make the problem be rewarding, not punishing. That's all you have to do. But some people choose shortcuts. They think the easy way out. Well, you buy a shock collar, shoot that responsibility on the owner. He makes the mistake, he punishes the dog, you're out of trouble. Well, you did the best you could. You used the Lima method, less intrusive, minimally aversive. Is that what we do? What is minimal? What I consider minimal, or what the dog senses minimal? The dog, that minimal senses is maximal because he's getting punished for doing something right. So Lima doesn't work. But that's another story. We're going to do another video about that. What works actually. So Lima is better than the other who don't care anything, that just punish what anything as much as possible because they feel good about it. And there are people who says, well, at least we go as minimal as possible. Not minimal. Not at all is the solution. Not at all. It just has a little bit more work. You get paid for it. Don't worry about it. You're not cutting short. As a trainer, you get paid for your service. The end result matters. But you know how good it feels if you get there without the dog suffering? Get there with the dog being comfortable? And I know the story. How many dogs you're going to save with a shock collar? I've said exactly the same thing. How many dogs do you save? You think you save dogs because here's what's happening. You save the dog in the situation, but you don't save the dog in troubleshooting. So he may get out of that problem, he get himself into another problem, and you will never hear from it because it's going to happen after you left. I've seen it many times, too many times, 2,500 times at least, not more, that using aversive methods on a dog to be saved. Think about it. I want to free slaves from slavery, and I'm going to punish them for being free. And what exactly do we do there? What kind of freedom do we give them? Right? So a dog is in a slavery position. He cannot get out of that relationship. He's trapped. It wasn't his choice to get there. So he makes a wrong mistake, and all of a sudden he's getting punished for it. He ends up in a shelter. It's not his choice. And you want to save him, but doing what exactly? Shocking the shit out of it to save him? Do what after that? Being afraid of being punished again? He was better in the shelter. Somebody would pick him up, or he's gonna die. Think about it. Living in hell, going through a shock collar and punishment, limited life expectancy, but you feel good of shock the dog out of his system, and now he's gonna be safe. You know what the goal is? Educating people for the dog not to get into that system in the first place. And why to get dogs in that place in the first place is because people don't know how to handle their dogs. And using a shock collar is not supportive of that system. It hits exactly the opposite because many dogs end up there because of those negative systems. People don't build relationships, they only build punishment until the punishment doesn't work anymore and they dump the dog on the streets and the dog will end up in a shelter, which you will then try to save with using a punishment the same way they got in. So we have this punishment vicious circle going on. It's like helping people with PTSD by creating PTSD so they get out of PTSD. Like, what the heck are you talking about? Being nice, being fancy, smiling, telling how wrong those people are who use cookies to help a dog change his mind. and you are more advanced that uses a shock collar because you're high tech. My ass. It's not high tech, it's low tech. Because high tech is the relationship, low tech are the tools. Yeah. Prove me wrong. You can say I'm wrong, but can you prove me wrong? But you can't. Because there's nothing there to prove that I'm wrong, because I just proved you wrong with scientific evidence. Yes, it's a talk, but I can show you evidence of my talk. And here's the thing, why would I show you that evidence? It's out there. Open a book, research it like I did. I had nobody telling me those scientific papers. I had to find them. I had to look for them, which is part of my education. Looking out for information that makes my job being better, being more successful, help more dogs, help more families. Am I 100% successful? No, I'm not. But I have a clear consciousness. No dog suffered. No person suffered. And I didn't suffer either. Right? But making a dog suffer for me to feel accomplished and the person feel good while the other guy who actually has the problem is being punished for it, well, that's wrong. Always was wrong. Before Christ and after Christ, it was wrong. Before the first cataclysm, before the second cataclysm, it was always wrong. It never was right. I'm passionate about. And I just keep my mouth closed because I don't see the reason for that. Because I was a complex trauma child and I couldn't talk. I was forced to be silent and it had a cost. So if your dog barks and you use a shock collar, you force your dog to be silent and he has to internalize it. Friends of mine who couldn't keep that internalization, they committed suicide. Yes, they did. Because somebody tried to shut them up. They didn't use a shock collar, they used violence, just as a shock collar. They use intimidation, just like a shock collar or the prong collar or the choke collar. Say a word, I'm going to punish you. Say a word, and you're going to be outspelled from school. Say a word about that priest touching your genitals, going to get you suspended from school. And I was quiet about it. And because I don't want to be quiet about it, I don't want the dogs to be quiet about it. I don't want nobody to be quiet about it because dogs have the right to express their emotions, just like you and me and everybody else. You don't like their emotions? Don't get a dog. Get a toy dog. I have one here. He's black. It cost me $34 on Amazon. He doesn't pee, he doesn't poop, he doesn't eat. I can keep him around, I can burn him, I can do whatever I want. He doesn't do anything because he's a fake dog. He's a stuffed dog. Get one of those. Positive reinforcement is not a stupid thing. It's not a lazy thing. It's not cookie cutting thing. It is highly skilled to find the motivation of the dog. It's not always cookies. It's the motivation. It could be a squeaky toy. It could be affection. It could be food. It could be a relationship. It could be so many things other than punishment. So you have more choices to work with. And guess what? Once the dog figures that you're supporting the dog to be better, he will want more of your information because it's of high value. It always has been. That's a knowledge of evolution since we are with dogs. Since dogs came to us on their own, sharing food and safety around the fire and help us get where we are now. The shock collar is not forward, it's backwards. Not even backwards because we didn't have it back then. It's just wrong, no matter how you push it. And no matter how gently you do it. no matter how low the intensity. The intention to punish the dog for doing something that he believes is right is wrong at the base. You're punishing the dog for feeling the need to express his emotion the way he does it, instead of changing his thoughts or inform the dog, educate the dog that what he sees is not that what he sees, it's different, it's better, and prove him that you're right. Don't punish him for being wrong. Don't. You can get out of there. But in order to get out of that mindset, you have to admit that it's not working. That's the only way out. It was hard for me because I had to admit that I made dogs suffer. It was hard to me. I felt really bad. Really. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed of all these people that I worked with. But now I can help more people. And internally, I ask for forgiveness. And I appreciate those people. Some of them still come back to me and still learn from me because they know I went whatever I knew better. And I always will. And maybe after tomorrow, I will tell you more than I told you today because I know more than yesterday. Don't stop researching and looking for better options to help a dog not being in fear and pain and stress. That's the only way out. Thanks for being present here and sharing the time with me. And maybe it helps somebody to change his mind. Thank you.